You are now listening to ethnographic researcher Dane Calloway.
So I want y'all to check out somebody named Dane Calloway.
Dane Calloway?
Look into Dane Calloway.
I'ma tell the truth and nothing but it, even if it's out of my constructed budget.
On I'm Just Here to Make You Think Radio.
And let's get into it. I posted, let's start with this one. I posted a message about a week ago with a quote from Eddie Griffin saying, think, it ain't illegal yet, but they working on it. I said as the caption to my post that there's a war going on between the people and those that feel threatened by the idea of people thinking logically, all due to the purpose of logic, which is to direct the intellectual powers in the investigation of truth and in the communication of it to others. In other words, there are particular groups of people out there in this world looking to cause confusion by propagating their own agendas, to which it leaves some individuals compliant with some strangers' fictional authorities. What gives any stranger the right to deem how their way of life operates as national law, and this is how it should be? Why should our people be forced to continue to allow strangers to give us the back end of the stick when it was literally our ancestors that built all of this? See, I don't like the fact that a student gets told to wait and hold all of their questions until the end of a lesson. Because by the time the indoctrinating lesson for the day ends, it forces the student to not ask the right questions because of their attention span having been manipulated. Or it could be that some people don't like to hear the truth simply because they grew accustomed to feeling comfortable with ideas that they were taught in compulsory educational institutions. Compulsory educational institutions. What is that, Dane? Well, the term compulsory is another way of saying words like inescapable, mandatory, obligated, contractual, enforceable, unavoidable. This type of education clearly deserves to be investigated, especially when students can only recall the name of their teacher that taught them the lesson versus knowing who created and cultivated the lesson from its inception. That's very important. The reason being is due to some authors of information could be just simply making it up, telling you or the reader these stories or folk tales as if they have any merit to being truthful, when in reality, these fictional historic tales, that's what they are merely a collage of ideas that have never been proven to be true in our faces. But regardless, they still are presented or propagated to the public as if they are facts somehow. It's crazy. This is the main reason why I tell all of my listeners and viewers to question everything. Like, for example, why was it so important for a generation of young children to be separated from their families in order to be educated if the stories were true about our families being separated and sold into slavery? Think about that now. How does that make any logical sense to you? I mean, the story of slavery says that our ancestors were separated from their families and sold into slavery. And then some years later, They were willing to send their children off to strangers in order to be educated by those same strangers or their offsprings that separated their families to begin with? How? It just doesn't make sense. See, this is why this goes back to why it is called compulsory education. Because this type of indoctrinating education was forced upon our people by way of missionaries and ministries, believe it or not, that was said to have brought the gospel to our people. Now listen closely. Classroom settings, meaning rows of chairs and tables aligned to face the teacher, were initially used in the basements of churches. If you didn't know that, now you know. History claims that our ancestors were murdered if they were caught learning how to read and write. So pastors would hold classes in the basements of churches to hide them from danger when learning. Now, some of you may believe that story is true. However, what can you recall learning in a classroom setting, but in a church? It's usually a Bible study class, right? Now, wouldn't that be a bold statement for anybody to make? To say that all people of color learned how to read and write in English through the study of the Bible? Does that make any logical sense to you? Who do you know that will have the patience to stand up in front of a classroom full of adults, or especially children, to teach them all from scratch how to read and write in English, and also make sure that they understand each and every story and lesson in the Bible? Did they get paid? How much they paying? Oh, and look, now keep in mind that these churches eventually became schools, but way before slavery allegedly ended in 1865. And the Federal Reserve notes began circulating in what, the 1930s? So what type of compensation were these pastors receiving? Just think, man. Were our ancestors not only forced to work the fields, but also forced to be followers and leaders of various religious faiths as a so-called slave? And if so, if you answer yes, were so-called slaveholders in control over what colored leaders of various religious faiths taught to their regular attendees in church? Uh-oh. See, and to dive a little deeper down a rabbit hole, the word institution is defined as a society or organization founded for a religious, educational, social, or similar purpose. The 1828 Webster's English Language Dictionary defines the word institution as a system, plan, or society established either by law or by the authority of individuals for promoting any object, public or social. So when you hear me say compulsory educational institutions, that also includes universities, colleges, foundations, corporations, fellowships, academies, organizations, and societies that must follow only by the laws, customs, or rather the institutions of a said concept or idea that is commonly agreed upon. So, who gets to decide what we are commonly taught throughout these institutions? See, these are some examples of questions that people should be asking, especially when they are in search of the truth. Because in order to connect the dots, you gotta trace them. And don't blame me for using my critical thinking skills. Remember that this is what you are taught to believe. And I'm just here to make you think about it. And so now I'm going to be reading some of the comments that were left under my post. Okay, give me a second. All right, one of them says, okay, here we go. That's the reason why reading was outlawed back then. A record was kept on everything. That's where the phrase conspiracy theory comes to mind, to make people with truth look and sound crazy, unbelievable. Now let's think about that for a second. Sister Brenda said, that's why reading was outlawed back then, and the records were kept on everything. This is even more reason to grab a hold of records of your individual family members. Because if it was outlawed for your ancestors to read, then just imagine the number of records that could possibly still exist that you and your family have no idea of. And yes, there are people of today's society out there right now that suffers from uncommonly known psychological issues that I previously covered in my documentary called Why the Truth Hurts and Lies Entertain, like confirmation bias, for example, in which these particular people can only result in using pejorative terms like conspiracy theorist to denounce or reject the information that I present, merely due to their lack of thinking logical and exploring other information outside of the norm. It's just that simple. The next comment says, do you honestly believe that all of these events that happens over the years are by accident or by coincidence? Or coincidence? Everything happens for a reason. There are people in high places pushing agendas directly down our throats to force us to accept the BS that's taken shape in front of us. People seriously need to wake up because things are going to get worse from here. Now, first, let me address the question. Do you honestly believe that a lot of these events that happened over the years are by accident or coincidence? And I will answer you by saying that not everything is a conspiracy, but not everything happens out of pure coincidence neither. So yes, I agree that everything happens for a reason. However, I wouldn't want to speak negativity into the atmosphere by saying things like, things are only going to get worse from here, because karma works both ways. If a person decides in their mindset that everything is going to be fine and will amount into a positive outcome, and your physical words match the positivity amongst your inner feelings, then you are welcoming the implementation of a greater amount of positivity into your reality. This is why the saying goes, be careful what you wish for. Because if Santa knows when you are good or bad, so does your consciousness. And if your consciousness is stuck on a negative train of thought, then karma reacts negatively and derails you off course. Now, next person says, the chains have been broken, but the mind is still enslaved. Now, I see what you're saying here, Sister Sandra, but I would change this around a little bit to say that the chains can only be broken when the mind is no longer enslaved. The chains can only be broken when the mind is no longer enslaved. In other words, slavery isn't over until you have full freedom over your way of life. Like, some states are still on lockdown right now. But did you really want to be cooped up in the house all day? Not half freedom, full freedom over your way of life. News media reporters, camera operators, broadcast studio employees, and even politicians can all gather around each other for long periods of time to give a coronavirus update, but not one person is obligated to wear a face mask. Not half freedom, full freedom over your way of life. All right. Pull up this next one. Okay, the balance of the world is off. We need to get right with love and nature and be aware of our bodies and health. Mental, physical, and spiritual. We are all one, and we must do better. Each one take responsibility, and we all will see this new world transform for the best. We are already changing, so let's be aware and mindful, my brothers and sisters. Yes, I concur with the comment. I think the important takeaway of her comment was the part about each person taking responsibility for their own actions. And the outcome or the aftermath would be in our best interest as a people. I totally agree with that. Everybody wants to know the solutions to our problems. But when solutions are given, everybody walks the same paths that they were just complaining about. See, I tell people the solution starts at home with you and your family, meaning that you must practice what you preach. Otherwise, you'll be contradicting yourselves in repeating fashion. Like for example, I'm gonna give an example. The issue concerning police officers blatantly murdering innocent people of color. This happens year after year after year after year, and solutions were presented that were either rejected by the court system, rejected by the governors of each state, rejected by the Fraternity Order of Police themselves, and even rejected by the President of the United States. So, if solutions were presented, like the implementation of social training courses, extensive psychological examinations, hefty fines and longer jail sentences, and even taking legal action against the insurance companies of these police departments. And none of these solutions seem to stop particular officers from being trigger happy. Then the next best solution, since all reasonable solutions have been exhausted already, is to shoot back. Listen, if you're in a position where you're forced to protect yourself, even against a peace officer whose duty is to protect and serve the public, then using lethal methods shouldn't be an issue here. Because enforcing the law does not give anyone the right to play God and eliminate whomever they please at any given time. It doesn't work like that. Take action. Stop talking. Okay. Move on real quick. Next person says, a thinking indigenous man is a dangerous man. A thinking indigenous woman is a dangerous woman. A thinking indigenous family is a dangerous family, especially when that thinking indigenous person realizes that their enemies come in various skin complexions. Listen, like, why are we constantly blaming a white man for every mishap that we allowed to occur? And we are still allowing for these mishaps to occur right now. Like for example, if a new rule was implemented that mandated every person residing in America to take a coronavirus vaccine, would you be willing to fight then? Or will you still have your tail stuck between your legs? I'm gonna tell you right now. Hold up. This was released May 1st. HR 6666. Listen, COVID-19 testing, reaching, and contacting everyone. Trace Act. TRACE. Testing, reaching, and contacting everyone. Listen. It says to authorize the Secretary of Health and Human Services to award grants to eligible entities to conduct diagnostic testing for COVID-19 and related activities such as contact tracing through mobile health units and, as necessary, at individual residents and for other purposes. Now, this isn't law yet, but this was introduced May 1st, 2020. We just gonna allow them to do it? So this is saying basically that the Secretary of Health and Human Services, by way of the CDC, is now getting grants and money in order to test and track and trace and monitor people if they're affected or not. It's not, see, and I try to smile, and I smile because this is reality, you know, and it's nothing funny. It's really nothing funny. But I smile to keep the positivity going. But this is no joke. That's going on right now. This is why we are considered dangerous. because our enemies are afraid of our awakening. Somebody knows that their time is up. So they are constantly exhausting every paid distraction that they could grab your attention with to throw you off course. I'm going to say that again. To throw you off course of controlling your mindset again. I'm just here to make you think.